Listen, some of you might get mad at me, but it needs to be said. Sometimes boomers are right. Sometimes they say things like the 80s were the best decade of horror, and I have a very hard time disagreeing. It's a crazy, mixed up world that we live in, it's true. I don't know if I could definitively say that the 80s were the best decade of horror, but a few months ago, I did release my top 50 horror movies of the 1980s, and since then, I've become a lot more obsessed with the decade. Prior to that, I might have told you that my favorite decade was the 1950s, or I might have told you the 2010s, because I was a teenager in the 2010s. It's when I fell in love with the genre. But I've watched a lot more 80s horror since I made that video, and so I need to share that with you all. Also, if you're new here, hi, I'm the Antichrist. I signal the end of times. I am Satan's favorite daughter. Whoa, that's a lot of information that I just threw at you. I'm sure that you might be a little bit scared or a little confused, but don't worry. Follow these simple instructions to join our cult and you'll be just fine. Click the subscribe button. It's as easy as that. And then click the like button and the notification bell. That way you never miss our next meeting. Also, don't worry, it's just a bit. We gotta keep the religious right-wingers away from this channel somehow. I don't know why I'm putting on that voice. This isn't scripted. Also, just a disclaimer, because if you're one of my more regular viewers, then you've probably heard me talk about most of these movies. And also, if you are one of the boomers that I was talking about who has good taste, then I don't think that these movies are gonna be that underrated to you. I'm gonna try my best to make a comparison here. Lights Out was a really big deal to me. I think it came out when I was 16. So I thought that it was a huge movie in pop cultural history. Like Lights Out, I thought it was fantastic. I was just getting into the horror genre. It was probably, within the first handful of horror movies I ever saw in theaters. I thought that it was a big deal. Like, I thought that it was sort of an instant classic. But now we're almost 10 years removed from that, and I just don't think that's the case. I don't see anybody really talking about that movie anymore. I don't see anybody listing that as one of their favorites. I don't see it as a cultural reference point for anything. But for me, I still like that movie. Like, I'll continue to rewatch it probably for the rest of my life because it was a touchstone when I was a teenager. That's what I think these movies are going to be. Like, some of them I feel like probably did have a decent theatrical release at the time, and they will be well within the memories of people that were around back then, or, people, like I mentioned, people that are already very much into the horror genre. I'm sure that you guys will know a lot of these already. This video is really more for people my age, more within my demographic. Like if you're in your 30s or younger, then I do think that I have a good handful of movies on this list that you probably haven't heard of. And maybe you're just getting into the genre, then this video is perfect for you, because I'm sure if you've looked into 80s horror, you might have already gone through Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. So these are movies you will find more off the beaten path. And I'm pretty sure, I'm gonna check as I go, that I think that every movie on this list has been logged less than 100,000 times on Letterboxd. Some of them I think have been logged less than 15,000 times. My honorable mentions are no exception. The first one is Christmas Evil. I have that at number 12. I always have honorable mentions, just deal with it. A toy maker who revels in the Christmas spirit suffers a mental break when his work is met with hypocrisy and cynicism and goes on a Yuletide killing spree. This one's free to watch on Tubi right now, and I won't linger because I know that it is a Christmas movie. We are nowhere near that season. Unless you're watching this from the future, good for you. Catching up on my old content, giving me those residuals, mwah. Christmas Evil, while very obviously a super low budget film, it was made for under $1 million. It has that early 80s charm. I mean, it came out in 1980, so really it was made in the late 70s. And that is just such a sweet spot for horror, I swear to God. I mean, Friday the 13th, that came out in 1980. John Carpenter's The Fog, that also came out in 1980. Also, a little movie called The Shining came out in 1980, so there's that. I just don't want to spoil anything about it because while it is a slasher, it's very psychological. I think that it leans more on its psychological elements than its slasher elements, and for that reason, I think that it's a really unique movie to come out in that time. I had to put it as an honorable mention because I've only seen it once and I watched it several years ago and I don't remember too much about it. I just know that I gave it 3.5 stars on Letterboxd, so that says something. At number 11, I know that this is not underrated, but somehow only 66,000 people have logged it on Letterboxd, so I think that's criminally underrated for how good it is. My Bloody Valentine. Oh, and as I am looking at it on Letterboxd, it now has 67,000 reviews. We did just have Valentine's Day, so that makes sense. A bunch of new people probably just found it, and a lot of people probably rewatched it. I did for the 3rd year in a row, thank you very much. Most Most of the people that I follow on Letterboxd give this movie 4 stars. I myself give it 4.5 stars. I think that it is nearly perfect. I love it so much. Basically, in this mining town, there was a tragedy several decades earlier, and now the town has been warned never to celebrate Valentine's Day again. But this year, the young adults in the town want to throw a Valentine's Day dance. 67,000 logs on Letterboxd is just not enough for me. I'm sorry. I'm really gonna need more people to watch this movie. That is the least underrated movie I think that I have on my list. I'm pretty sure. So if you're rolling your eyes at that one, just cut me some slack. A lot of people my age don't know that movie, and they should. So now they will. At number 10, we are getting into the 10 most underrated horror movies of the 1980s, but not really because it's on my metric, but you're just gonna have to deal with it. At number 10, we have Humanoids from the Deep. And this one also came out in 1980. This is a science gone wrong creature feature, and it takes place on the 4th of July. A new species of mysterious mutated sea creatures begin terrorizing the town. This one, to be fair, I only gave it 2.5 stars. I do think that it's kind of underrated for a reason. Only 18,000 people have logged it on Letterboxd, so very underrated. The reason why I put it on this list is because while it's not necessarily a movie for me, I do think it is a movie that I would rewatch, especially because it is another holiday slasher. I don't know why they've all been holiday so far, but there are some really fun practical effects. The monsters are a lot of fun. The main shenanigans the monsters get into, though, are not going to be for a large portion of you. Although, let me explain. The monsters are technically essaying the women in the movie. However, to my recollection, I don't even know if I necessarily picked up on that. Like, I think it's really more implied, especially because it's really goofy. It's, you know, the practical effects of 1980, or let me clarify, the low budget practical effects from 1980, that I think that it comes off a lot more charming than it does disturbing. But definitely take that information and do with it what you will, because I know that it won't be for everyone. At number 9, we have a movie called Teen Witch, and this is another one that I did give 2.5 stars, but I kind of loved it. You'll notice a lot of movies on this list, My Bloody Valentine included. They are among some of the cheesiest, probably, of the 1980s. Also, Teen Witch, I don't know if a lot of people really consider it horror, but it is a witch movie, and it stars the woman from Poltergeist. Oh, what's her name? Zelda Rubinstein. Yes, our girl from Poltergeist. She's in this one too. High school nerd Louise Miller learns from psychic Madame Serena that she's possessed with magical abilities that will begin working on her 16th birthday. Naturally, this is a witch movie, and it is a coming-of-age movie. Pretty par for the course for a lot of those types of stories. If you've ever seen, like, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, if you've seen The Craft, Birth Control. You know that song and dance. They get powers, they do entirely too much with them, and then they learn a lesson and they come of age. But it's sweet. I just really have an affinity for the corniness of low-budget 80s movies. Plus, we know Zelda Williams. It's fun to see her as another kind of kooky character, as this older witch. And the hair. It's always fun to see that 80s hair. It's on full display here. This is a 1989 film, and so I don't know if the hair just kept getting bigger throughout the decade, but it's great. Anyway, moving on to our number 8, I have Slumber Party Massacre 2. A lot of people have probably heard of the first one. I don't know if it's necessarily a household name though. Like, I wouldn't say that most 24-year-olds know that movie. So I guess I could have included the first one on this list. But I just feel like, you know, if you like horror, you've probably heard the name. The second movie is so underrated. It is ridiculous. Like, I can't even explain to you. When I watched the movie and I logged it on Letterboxd, I said, if the people who made Grease were on crack. If that doesn't sell the movie for you, I don't know what will. It's unhinged. It's so unhinged. It's so colorful. It's so 80s. It's so much fun. That's the bottom line. That's all you need to know. At number 7, I do have another holiday movie for you, but it's a little bit more unexpected. I have April Fool's Day from 1986. When a group of college students decides to spend spring break at the secluded island estate of their wealthy classmate, what starts out as a fun, hedonistic weekend turns into something more sinister. What I really want to stress about this one is that it's not just another typical run-of-the-mill 80s slasher. It's actually a really, really fun whodunit. Sort of in the vein of the original Friday the 13th, and very similar to what trends we would see in the 1990s after the release of Scream. And given that it takes place at this wealthy estate and all of that, for some reason that makes me think of I Know What You Did Last Summer, because it's following all those super wealthy teenagers. I just think it combines so many good horror elements. It gives us the sort of 1960s feelings of when a lot of horror took place in big mansions, and also in the late 50s as well, kind of before horror moved to suburbia in the 1970s. But then it also has kind of a pre-90s whodunit type feeling to it too. I haven't watched it in several years. I just remember that I had so much fun with it, and I think that enough time has gone by that hopefully when I watch it, my memory isn't jogged and I get to basically watch the reveal again for the first time. I remember the vibes, but I don't remember the story, so it's kind of perfect. April's coming up too, so definitely put that one on your watch list. At number 6, we have Chopping Mall. Much like April Fool's Day, this one also came out in 1986. In this movie, a bunch of teenagers break into a mall late at night, but what they don't know is the mall has recently employed some robots to act as security guards, and thus begins a night of slaughter. This movie is so much fun. It stars Barbara Crampton, although she does deserve better than what happens in this movie. I love Barbara Crampton. I love that she is still a working actor in this genre. I just really wish that we got more of her in Chopping Mall, but it's still so much fun. And it's so interesting to me. Listen, tinfoil hat moment incoming. RoboCop came out the year after, and the turnaround for movies is not that fast, I know this. But you can see so many elements of Chopping Mall in RoboCop, and RoboCop, I think that's one of the best movies of the 1980s. I love it. Also very much has a Terminator vibe. But in Chopping Mall, you see these like Reagan era capitalism brained mall CEOs replacing human security guards with robots that are just kind of trained to kill. Or I forget, they might not have been trained to kill, but like to apprehend. But then of course they go on the fritz. It's sort of like an AI tale as well. I love when a slasher has a little bit more to it than that. I love when there are layers. But if you don't care about that, then you can also just turn off your brain and enjoy such a stupid premise. Oh my gosh, I forgot to be mentioning how many people logged these movies on Letterboxd. Okay, let me catch you up. Teen Witch, oh my gosh, exactly the same as Humanoids from the Deep. 18,000 people have logged it on Letterboxd. For Slumber Party Massacre 2, only 26,000 people have logged it. Only 25,000 people have logged April Fool's Day, and don't mix that up with the 2008 remake. I actually haven't seen that remake yet. Oh, that is so surprising to me. 58,000 people have logged Chopping Mall on Letterboxd. I would not have expected that. I wonder, ooh, that one's probably on Shudder or something. Sometimes movies do get a second life when they're released to Shudder, because they always list out all the movies that are incoming for the next month, I think like a few days before the first of every month. So I wouldn't be surprised if this one had a second life recently. Or it's just a bigger movie than I thought. Anyways, let's move on to number 5. At number 5, we have Rush Week, which, much like Teen Witch, also came out in 1989. This one, only 1.8 thousand people have logged on Letterboxd. This is a bona fide, underrated horror movie. An ambitious young journalist working for her college newspaper becomes intrigued by the recent string of disappearances of several female students. Oh, this movie, I watched this one more recently, so I remember more about it. It had everything that I love about like an 80s frat party movie. I've sort of developed a little bit of an affinity for them since more recently getting into more 80s horror. This was far and away my favorite one of all of the more underrated ones that I watched. I think my Blu-ray of it came from Vinegar Syndrome. Somebody sent it to me. Thank you so much. My subscribers send me physical media pretty often, and I thank you so much for that one. I never would have known about it otherwise. I never would have bought it for myself, and now I love that movie. There are multiple scenes in the movie dedicated to just watching bands play at a frat party, and I'm like, oh, I mean, I know that there was less accountability back then, and so that's terrible, but the party vibes looked a lot better. I grew up in the wrong era, I swear to God. I've never enjoyed pop music, I have never enjoyed hip hop or rap, and that was all that was ever played at like my college parties. Oh, what I would not give to just go to a party where there's live music. Anyways, not the point. But because of this movie, I discovered the song called Booby Trap. Booby Trap, Booby Trap. It's by a band called the Dickies, and I guess the song was also in Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Oh, I didn't know that. Anyway, there's a band performing it in Rush Week, so there's that. It's just fun. I think the story is good. There's a pretty good twist. I think a lot of you will probably predict it, but whatever. It doesn't make the reveal in the climax any less fun. It's such an underrated killer formula reveal scene. I feel like in the 80s, there just were so many mindless slashers that were copying the formula of Friday the 13th, and there was one of those from that franchise almost every single year during that decade, that the really fun, kind of low-key whodunits just fell under the radar. Rush Week, I know that a lot of you guys probably won't like it as much as I did. It just combined so many of my favorite elements. Still a 3.5-star movie for me because it's very low budget. I mean, the acting is terrible, but the vibes are strong with this one. Anyway, moving on to number 4, we have The Stepfather. This is from 1987, and only 28,000 people have logged it on Letterboxd. So far, the highest logged movie has been My Bloody Valentine, with the runner-up being Chopping Mall, and both of those under 70,000. In The Stepfather, a seemingly mild-mannered man who has just murdered his entire family quickly adopts a new identity and leaves town. After building a new relationship with a widow and her teenage daughter, he struggles to hide his true identity and maintain a grip on reality. This movie had a very critical tone of its protagonist, which I feel like is something that I just don't see a lot of from 80s movies, least of which 80s horror. At that time, I just feel like there weren't that many strong protagonists in horror besides, you know, you have your Nancy Thompsons, of course, but I don't mean just, you know, a final girl that kicks ass. I mean a character that is really complex, has layers, is really well written. That's what The Stepfather has going on. Not to say you come to understand this man or root for him in any way, it's just sometimes it's fun to watch an emotionally complex character. I really shouldn't have to explain myself on that, but media literacy is so far down the tubes. It's pretty much mandatory at this point, especially when there's so many people treating my comment section like it's the goddamn Google search bar. What happened to resourcefulness? Well, what happened to common sense? I don't know. Anyways, from what I remember, The Stepfather definitely leans a little bit more on its drama elements, and I don't remember having a super fun time. I don't think I even gave the movie a heart when I logged it on Letterboxd, but I was like, you know what? Real recognizes real. I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars still, because it was still a strong movie even if I wasn't having the best time. It's definitely worth at least the one-time watch. The performances are also really interesting. Getting into my top 3, at number 3 we have The Toxic Avenger. This movie is from 1984, maybe overshadowed by Friday the 13th, the final chapter, I don't know. Tromaville has a monstrous new hero. The Toxic Avenger is born when mop boy Melvin Junko falls into a vat of toxic waste. Now evildoers will have a lot to lose. Watched by 55,000 people, and I think that this one is also streaming. Yep, it's on Tubi. This movie is kind of the epitome of dumb 80s fun. Emphasis on dumb and emphasis on fun. The practical effects are really good. I don't think that this was a micro budget. I think this was more of a mid-budget movie at the time. There also was a remake that came out apparently last year, but it didn't have any kind of distribution yet as far as I know. I would love to see the remake. I loved this original movie. It's another 3.5 star, and maybe you'll notice that with a lot of these more underrated ones. The first few that I mentioned were more like 2.5, and then now we're in the 3.5 star territory. It's because I will admit that some of these movies are more underrated for a reason. They're not the cream of the crop. Otherwise, they would be true classics. So just, I should have mentioned that at the top, but keep that in mind for all these movies. Except for My Bloody Valentine and except for the number 1 on this list, those are both mwah, mwah, mwah. Anyways, The Toxic Avenger, it does have some kind of like outdated stuff. If you're used to the much more sexually sanitized movies of today, then it might be a little bit off-putting. There's just some boobs and some sex and a lot of the male gaze, so you're just gonna have to deal with that. When I first started getting into older horror movies, it kind of pissed me off. I'm like, why? This is how women were depicted back then? Like, I just was coming out swinging. I was just mad at the world because I was discovering my place in the food chain. Once you're past that, you can have a lot of fun. When I logged it on Letterboxd back in the day, I said the kind of stupid that makes me happy. I think that about sums it up. Let's move on to my number 2, which is Demons by Italian director Mario Bava. It's also produced by Dario Argento and came out in 1985. A group of people are trapped in a West Berlin movie theater infested with ravenous demons who proceed to kill and possess the humans one by one, thereby multiplying their numbers. This one has been viewed 53,000 times on Letterboxd. It is currently streaming on Shudder. Oh, looks like it's also on Screambox. Nice. I talked about this movie very recently, so I will try to keep myself brief here. If you have found yourself looking for more 80s movies to watch recently because you love the practical effects and the amazing gore of that time, then this is the movie for you. This movie is disgusting. The makeup is disgusting. The gore is nasty, but it is such a blast. I will say that I'm not ever too invested in the characters of this movie. I don't typically care for a lot of the downtime because there's just not that much substance to the rest of it for me. The good news is that I would say over half the movie is just jam-packed with this nutty action. You know what? It feels like an Evil Dead movie. It literally feels like it could just be a sequel to Evil Dead. That's what it is. Evil Dead is much more mainstream, so if you like that movie, watch Demons. Oh, I should do that. I should make a video, like, if you like this movie, watch that movie. I could do it for the decades. Ooh. Or should I just keep doing underrated lists? Let me know. That's really all there is to say for Demons. There's just some crazy action, fantastic gore, and that's all you need. At the #1 spot in my top 10 most underrated horror movies of the 1980s, we have Night of the Creeps. This is from 1986. It has only been viewed 39,000 times on Letterboxd, and I think that it is the most criminally underrated on this whole list. In 1959, an alien experiment crashes to Earth and infects a fraternity member. They freeze the body, but in the modern day, two geeks pledging a fraternity accidentally thaw the corpse, which proceeds to infect the campus with parasites that transform their hosts into killer zombies. Did I say earlier that Rush Week was my favorite of the 80s frat horror that I watched? Because that was a lie. It's Night of the Creeps. Ooh, let's talk about comedy. Let's talk about the fact that this is Tom Atkins' best role. Yes, I said it. Yes, I did. And I love Halloween 3. I love Halloween 3. He's in The Fog as well. He's even in the remake of My Bloody Valentine. God bless him. This is his best role, and I'm being so deadly serious. He's hilarious. The entire cast is hilarious. The writing is phenomenal. This is a 4-star film to me. I was obsessed with it the first time that I watched it. It's so surprising to me for some reason that this movie has been viewed less than something like Chopping Mall. There are so many good lines of it. Tom Atkins has far and away the best line of the entire thing. If you've seen the movie and you would like to guess, then please put it in the comments, because if you know, you know. If you are looking for an 80s horror movie that has it all, a movie that's dumb fun, I mean, it's a true dark comedy. If you want the practical effects, if you want Tom Atkins, I feel like he's the kind of the epitome of 80s horror actors. You know, besides the guys that were in the makeup behind the masks, you know what I mean? Also excluding actresses, because we had Jamie Lee Curtis and there's not much of a competition there, but you also get to see briefly an 80s interpretation of the 50s. I love that when I'm watching movies that are like 40 years old and there's like a flashback in it. If you took notice, the top 3 movies on this list are far and away just the most intentionally dumb and fun. The Toxic Avenger, Demons, Night of the Creeps. I mean, that's a great little marathon right there. I'm sorry to anyone that was not really surprised or didn't find anything new on this list, but I hope that's not the case. At any rate, I hope that you just enjoyed hearing me talk about some 80s horror movies. Let me know if you'd like to see me do this for other decades. I could certainly do it for the 90s, early 2000s. I could go on and on. I also, in all my years of watching horror, have still not gotten too into 70s horror. That is a decade that I really do need to explore more, so as I do that, then hopefully more 70s horror content will come out. I'm probably not ready to do an underrated of the 70s list yet, but someday we'll get there. Right now, I'm really trying to be better about watching more international horror, so I'm catching up on more Asian horror movies and obviously more Italian horror movies. So give me all your recs down below. Let me know what you think the most underrated horror movie of the 1980s is. I am always looking for more movies to put on my watch list. Can never have too many, so I hope that you put some of these on your watch list today too. If you want even more content from me, you can also find me over on my second channel where I talk about physical media. I am very deeply passionate about it. I also go on spooky outings, so last week I took you guys along with me to the Beetle House in LA, which is a Tim Burton themed bar and restaurant experience. Before that, I went to the most haunted hotel in California, to the Mission Inn. That's just the kind of stuff I do over there, and if you want even more bonus reviews from me, if you want to see the behind the scenes of how I make my own short films, you can join us over on Patreon. Everything you need is listed down below, but more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye!